Today we're going to talk about how to properly curate a sports card collection as we round out 2024. We're heading into 2025. Can you believe it? What's going on, sports card hobby family? It's another day. It's another sports card video. Hopefully you had an amazing weekend. My New Orleans Saints did their very best to try to lose to the New York Giants. Neither team wanted to win yesterday, but my Saints pulled it out with a blocked field goal at the end of the game of all things. And we moved to 5-8. To be honest with you, I'm looking at mock drafts and really just kind of looking more towards next season. Before I dive into today's video topic, huge thanks to today's video sponsor, COMC.com. 40 million cards in the sports card database. Not just sports cards, non-sports, a lot of Marvel card collectors on the site. The easiest platform to buy and sell cards, and you can grade cards through COMC. There's actually something we're going to talk about on Wednesday's episode about COMC that's going to be really interesting that you're going to want to find out about. Check out my links down below to start your COMC journey today. All right, I watched an excellent episode yesterday of Slabs. I believe that's what Jeff Wilson calls this series. He went over to Texas to meet with Patrick Ryan, who is, I believe it's P. Ryan Collection on IG. Definitely worth a follow over there. I don't believe he's got a YouTube, but on IG he does lives and he shares cards and just different thoughts on the hobby. Who is Patrick Ryan? Now, admittedly, I've never met Patrick Ryan before. I've had some different conversation with him via DMs, but I've never met him in person. So what I do know of him is his first national. I believe he said this in the video with Jeff. Went to his first national in 2013, so a little over a decade ago, and really started to buy into collectibles. Now, that wasn't his first stint into collecting baseball cards and collectibles, of course. Just like me and many others, as a kid, he was collecting, and then really got heavy into it in the early 2010s, getting back into it, and really kind of buying into sports cards and sports memorabilia at high prices for the time, which of course now look like pretty deep bargains. I believe he's a season ticket holder for the Dallas Mavericks. I could be wrong there, but he is a Mavericks fan from my understanding. And of course, when the Luka craze happened, he was ahead of that game. He says in this video with Jeff that he spent somewhere around like $30,000 to get a lot of the really nice Luka cards. When it was all said and done and he had sold a lot of it off, he netted out about $400,000 from that buy-in. So he got it right, and actually he said that he wanted to go in on Giannis previously, going back to 2013, 14, 15, and didn't go in as much as maybe he wanted to. And so when he had that hunch again, when Luka came along, that's when he went full blast into it. And it paid off really well for him. So he's been ahead of the game on a lot of the hobby trends as we moved into the 2020 pandemic. But I love this episode because he has huge variety here in his collection, and a lot of it is based in my world, which is the 80s, 90s nostalgia stuff. I mean, that's what we talk about a lot here. That I grew up in the late 80s, early 90s, really during the card boom. Just cards, of course, but all sorts of just the 80s, the 90s nostalgia stuff, comic books, toys. Did see a copy of NBA Jam that he had in there, so I see that he's also got some graded games as well. And look, I think that's kind of the biggest challenge when curating a collection is the sea of cool stuff out there. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And so while he is a high-end buyer, this is a multi-million-dollar collection, he also has a lot of cards that are $20, $30, $50, $100 that just speak to him in some fashion. I think something to keep in mind is Rome was not built in a day. You know, a lot of people, they get in, they come in hot and heavy, they get really excited, and maybe they burn out or they just they flame out because, again, there's a lot of really cool things. There's a lot of different avenues, a lot of different ways to hobby. And so, I think a lot of people just do get in and they just don't have a lot of direction. And that's part of it, though. The journey is really part of it. A lot of times people don't realize that your collection evolves over time, tastes change, and something that I can speak to specifically for, in my instance, but definitely I know for Patrick Ryan and many other collectors, is that things come out of the woodwork, items that maybe were not on your radar, and you're like, damn, I have got to move mountains to get into this particular item. Maybe it's a vintage baseball card that you thought you would never really have a shot at, and then all of a sudden the stars align. There's an auction that pops up, and it's something that maybe it was out of reach, but you built up some card inventory with some cash, and you're like, you know what? I could move out of 7 to 10 cards and maybe throw some cash on, and I could have that thing that was never really on my radar in the first place. This goes for if you're talking about lower end, mid end, or higher end. It might be that you've got 7 $10 cards that you can then move into and add some cash. You're into a $100 card. It's all relative. It's a few $100s that you're moving into 1,000. Up and up it goes. And that, I think that managing your card / collectibles inventory is a lot of the fun of the hobby as well. There's a few different ways to collect. You can just accumulate, and maybe you have the means to just be able to continue to buy. You don't really need to sell or trade anything. You're set up well, you've got a budget, you're kind of sticking to that budget. I do know that a lot of the hobby, if not most hobbyists, they're buying, selling, trading. And this happens to me where something I bought a year ago that I thought was awesome, I see something now that is just more awesome, and I'm using some of the things that I might have to get into that thing that's more awesome. There's also a speculation part of the hobby as well, to where maybe you feel like there is an under the radar player out there, or there's a superstar that is just underpriced, or maybe you just catch a good deal on an auction and you're able to get into that card at a good price, and then you can use that as trade bait for something else, or you're kind of using that to get into something that you might like more. So you buy it knowing like, hey, that's not a forever card, that's not a PC card for my collection, but I think that maybe this player had a down year, or there's an injury or something like that. The card prices are down, and this is a lot of what happens in our hobby. People take advantage of lower prices because this player is off of the radar. And then, of course, the next season is coming up. Maybe that team has some good draft picks, whatever the case may be. And all of a sudden, that player that might have been injured or just off the radar going back 4, 5, 6, 8 months ago, they're in the spotlight now, and you bought the cards cheap. You can sell them for more. And there's some arbitrage, some short-term flip opportunity there, and then the short-term flip money can then be used to fund longer-term buys. That's really kind of how I do it. I really struggle with taking my longer-term buys and moving those into other longer-term buys. That's something that I've got to work at and really kind of assess all the time, kind of what has got to stay in my collection, like what's a long-term hold, and if this thing pops up, am I willing to move out of some of those things? I haven't done as well with that. I've been able to move out of kind of the smaller things to get into the larger things, but now I'm really out of the smaller things to move into the larger things. Now I would need to move out of other things or put new money in. So this was a 1-hour episode with Patrick Ryan, taking some of his top 100. I thought this was a cool project. So think about this a little bit. He has a lot of cards in his collection, but he's got a top 100, and then he's always kind of maneuvering within that top 100. What was really cool about this is he was telling, first off, personal stories about how he acquired that particular card, and then also why was that card relevant to him at the time, and then also why is this card so relevant that it makes it into the top 100. Always listening to a why behind somebody's top 20 or top 50 or top 100 is really fascinating. I'm actually thinking about doing the same thing with my collection, and I think it's a good exercise anyway to figure out, oh wow, well maybe this is something that I thought was great, but what, it can't even crack my top 25? It can't even crack my top 50? That I think would be a really fun project to work on. So that's something that I'm going to do. But anyway, we're going to play a clip here that I thought was really excellent because, again, he's more on the higher end, and he's breaking down the why behind Walter Payton rookie card PSA 10, Joe Montana, and Jerry Rice PSA 10. But there's something here. Let's go ahead and play the clip, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
What's next?
So skipping a couple decades, we're moving to the 1976 Topps Walter Payton.
Oh, and this one's a PSA 10. These are really hard to find in 10s.
Yeah, I think Walter Payton, as a football legend, I mean, he has one of the best sports nicknames of all time, Sweetness.
Yeah.
That card is sweet. And I love having it. It's just, look, and that's one of those cards that what I like about collecting is if someone had a PSA 1 of that card, I respect that. That's a couple $100 card. That's, mid 5 figures, right? But the rarity of it makes it special to me. But I think what's cool is that's a card that's affordable for a lot of collectors. You just don't have to have a PSA 10.
Are we going to tip into the early 80s next?
Yes, but we're going to also jump into the mid 80s. So I want these two cards to live together.
Oh, well, that makes sense. This is quite the pair. Wow, 2 10s. This is really good stuff here. Talk about these.
Well, growing up, Montana to Rice
Yep.
was the connection.
Yep.
And it was the iconic connection. And so having those cards in the collection as PSA 10s, again, cards that is PSA 1s, PSA 2s, very affordable for pretty much anyone who collects. And I respect people that want to have those just to have, a connection to the history. The 10s are uniquely rare. And I do like these cards because they've been pretty stable. I did buy them before the big hype, which is fortunate. And I'll say that, sometimes when people might think that Pat Mahomes or Joe Burrow kind of priced them out, maybe look at a low-range, mid-end Montana or Rice. It's a way to kind of connect to the football collecting game that's often overlooked.
All right, so if you caught that there, of course, these are creme de la creme, just, PSA 10. These are excellent looking copies of very tough grades, whether it be the 81 Topps Montana, 86 Topps Jerry Rice, or of course the 76 Topps Walter Payton. These are all fantastic cards, and I actually do believe these cards hover around, $50,000, $60,000 in the PSA 10. Some, I think the Rice might be like 75, 80. But the main point is when you look at how much money is being spent on cards and collectibles, to me, I think that these are excellent buys. These would be like if I had serious cash, if I had a couple $1,000,000 and it's like, all right, we're going to go into the card market and we're going to buy some long-term holds on the higher end. These are three perfect examples of that because vintage football, and I know 80s football is not necessarily vintage, but it's on the cusp, it's on the brink there. It doesn't get any sort of the same love that you would see on the baseball side or even on the basketball side. Of course, basketball, just a lot fewer sets, but vintage football or 80s football, to me, when you just compare to a lot of, ultra modern cards even, and then other vintage baseball cards, for example, they feel like good buys, and he mentions this. But the other thing that Patrick Ryan mentions too that I think is a great point is you can own this card in a slightly lower grade. Maybe it's a great presenting 7, and I pulled out price points for 7. For the Rice, the PSA 10, of course, like I said, that might be $60,000, $70,000, $80,000. For the 7, it's a $75 card. They're not rare. They are abundant out there, but this is a classic card, an all-time classic. Really fits anybody's budget in the hobby. So for 60, 70, $80, you're in a PSA 7 on an all-time card. Same with Montana. PSA 7, $150 to $200 approximately for a PSA 7 Montana. I think a Walter Payton in a 6 or a 7, it's like $400, $500, $600 card, a little bit more expensive, but the point here is that you can work up to these cards. There's grades for everybody. You could get it in a 5. And going back to when he's talking about his 52 Topps mantle, right now he's got a PSA 2 and he's got a PSA 5 that he recently got. And basically what he was saying is he's kind of worked up to get to the 5. Like you start with a 1, then you go to a 2, then a 3, then a 5. You can kind of take your time. Again, Rome wasn't built in a day. And also taking the time to figure out, okay, what grade do I really want or need for this card? Patrick Ryan says that 5 might be the highest grade that he ever owns. Does he want to pay up to get into a 6, 7, 8? Maybe he will. Or maybe he'll see other things. Maybe there's other things that pop up. I think one of the items too that he showed was a Jackie Robinson debut ticket, which is like creme de la creme in the ticket market. I mean, it's a huge ticket. Jackie Robinson, obviously historical baseball player, just a historical figure in general. The debut ticket of him playing in the majors, it's huge. So there's so many different factors that go into really picking out your long-term holds, your PC items. And it doesn't necessarily have to be based on monetary value either. You could have different items. Maybe it was something passed down from your dad, gave you a particular card. So it's got a different type of value to it than just monetary value. It could be cards that you collected as a kid. Maybe it's your original, 89 Pro Set cards that you owned when you were 10. There's something to that too, those memories for those particular cards. I've got a box, of cards that I owned when I was 8, 9, 10, 11 years old that survived. Now, 30 years later, now I'm going through it. I've still got that box of cards, and it's fun to flip through that box and then think about like, why did I have this card? And then all of a sudden it'll jog your memory. Speaking of Rice and Montana, I remember having Favre and Sterling Sharp, and Rice and Montana had these really cool, I don't remember the insert, but it was Pinnacle. Pinnacle made great football cards in the early 90s. They had these kind of like these dual, and I can't remember, I'll have to find it maybe I'll make another video just on that, like the childhood cards. I made that video like 3 years ago, but maybe I'll bring them back out and just talk about it because it plays into what we're doing here again today. It's kind of similar. When you're a kid, you got certain cards in your collection. Maybe you're trading out of this to get into that because your taste has changed or whatever. You're excited about something new. It's what makes this hobby really great. And so definitely check out this video. You'll learn new things about certain cards, certain sets. But again, it goes back to the why as to why these cards. That is always something that I think is so fascinating with collectors. All right, friends, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.